Welcome to the channel. Today we are going to talk about entrepreneurship. So if you were thinking of leaving your job and starting a startup or just a business, or if you're in a university and wanting to start your own venture once you're out there, this video is certainly for you. And hang on till the end because I have one myth and one important piece of wisdom at the end of it. Because of course I have been told to use hooks for my YouTube videos. And why should you listen to me? Well, I have been an entrepreneur myself and I come from a family of entrepreneurs. So not only do I have the first-hand experience of building a business, but I also have the experience of observing my family members and even my extended family in different types of businesses. And beyond that, when I set up my own consulting firm, I worked with many micro, small and medium business owners. So I have worked with these entrepreneurs as well. So I have not only been through those phases personally, but I have experienced, or rather observed, my family members, extended family and clients experiencing these phases as they build their businesses. So hang on and let us jump in. So one clue here for the myth: perfection can be lethal, because often at times an average product with great execution works better than a perfect product that failed to materialize because of the pursuit of perfection. So hang on for it at the end. Now, beginning with the first phase. Initially when you begin, you are hit with euphoria. Let's call it Alice in Wonderland, because this is when you become an entrepreneur. You learn or experience the freedom of being your own boss. Isn't that liberating? Well, that's a moment of joy or liberation that you feel when you first decide to become an entrepreneur. And you go through this phase in incremental steps. First, you feel at ease because there's no structure. You no longer have to report to work at a certain time. You no longer have reports to be submitted at certain deadlines. You don't panic because it's end of day and you have work due. You are at ease in absence of the structure. And because you are just starting off, you have new ideas rushing through your brain, and it gives you influxes of dopamine from time to time. It keeps you awake at night because you're excited. You just want to try them on. You want to put these ideas at work. So you have the influx of new ideas and it's rushing through your brain, and at times it would be often maddening. And then you develop your first pitch. You start pitching it to your family members, friends, ex-colleagues, peers, people from university. You start hitting the road and you often get positive feedback because these people want to encourage you. And often at times there might be a few people who try to poke holes into your assumptions or question your product, but don't dismiss them. These are the people you want to listen to carefully, because when everyone encourages you, you need people who disagree with you, get to know their reasoning and their perspective. But anyway, you get that positive feedback. This also leads to new beginnings, because now that you have decided you want to start your own venture, you probably get your company registered, you go to Canva, make your new logo, business card, then you probably make your first investments like getting your first domain name, getting a new laptop, getting an office subscription, or whatever. You make these first investments. So these new beginnings and these small wins materialize. So you keep getting that dopamine hit every now and then. And if you're getting into a conventional business, while like selling an established product or offering some service like business consulting or marketing or digital marketing, then you might even land your first client. So that joy of the first paycheck. But this is where your euphoria starts phasing out. This is when you start hitting the second phase, which I call reality hits. And this is when the wonderland starts turning into Jumanji, because then you realize the freedom that you experienced is actually responsibility, because you do not have a boss anymore. You got to have your own back, because you know not even have colleagues or co-workers who are gonna have your back. You are responsible for everything. Everything stops at your table and the buck stops at you. And that idea rush that you're experiencing, things that you wanted to put into action, will now overwhelm you, because now you realize you're not only the epicenter of all the work, but you're also the epicenter of all the decision making. Because unlike a corporate hierarchy where you can pass some of the decisions to your boss, your peers, or people in other departments, here you are the sole proprietor. You have to be responsible for all the decisions and their consequences. So there might be decisions decisions you might procrastinate, you might fear at making, but remember, you have to make those decisions. Of course, you should consider perspectives, run it through other people or people close to you, people familiar with the subject matter, but remember, you have to own up to that decision. And this brings us to the next point, which is no direct feedback loop. Because unlike a corporate hierarchy where if you're not doing something properly, you have your supervisor or manager or some subject matter expert to ask whether you're doing it correctly or ask for the right way of doing it. Here you do not have anyone. You have to create your feedback loops either by having people advise you pro bono or having your well-wishers, finding some of your ex-colleagues to run through your ideas, but there won't be any direct feedback loops when you start off. And then the next thing happens, the appreciation that you got when you first pitched your product or service now suddenly turns into feedback, because rather than pitching people you start pitching potential audience or potential clients and investors, and they start questioning you or they start giving you feedback because probably they have come across similar companies or similar people offering the same services or products, and they have their own perspectives, opinions, and apprehensions. So you start getting questioned. So that appreciation now becomes feedbacks. But the next thing that happens is even more important. When you're working at a job, your bank account gets credited for a fixed amount on a fixed date every month. But when you become an entrepreneur, that no longer happens. You realize there are these income expense caps. You can no longer afford the subscription to that lifestyle because your payment receipts are not predictable. So you realize that you have to budget for things because you're now responsible not only for yourself but also for your business. And this is when it feels like the weight is too much to carry and it's breaking you. But this is when you enter the third phase, which is reincarnation. As they say, what doesn't kill you only makes you stronger. So don't get overwhelmed or don't give up. Stay strong, stay put, and you're gonna reincarnate. So what happens here? You start to realize that you have to break the habit, because what worked for you when you're working a job no longer works when you are in entrepreneurship or a business, because business is a different ballgame, and you would have realized from everything that we have discussed until now. So you need to break that. But how does that happen? First, you need to accept that your situation has changed and then become aware and understand your current situation. What's working, what's not working, and how everything around you is functioning. So you start assessing, knowing what works for you as an entrepreneur and knowing what doesn't work for you. Things that are yielding results, things that are leading you nowhere. Probably the clients that you're chasing are not yielding any results. Probably it's time to reconsider, give up, or send them a final email, something like that. So you need to figure out what works and what doesn't work. But this can also be your own schedule, because when you're working at a job, you might be having a fixed routine, like waking up in the morning, going through your morning routine, turning up at work, and it works fantastic for you. But in entrepreneurship, that's not the case. You now need to adapt to the new reality, because in entrepreneurship, priorities change every now and then. It's like an agile project management thing where you always have a backlog of things that need to be done and priorities are changing every day. So you need to adapt to this new reality, and you need to reinvent your methods and ways of doing things. But remember one thing, when you are reinventing yourself, don't try to chase that perfect entrepreneur lifestyle as touted by the internet or let's say influencers who claim to have multi-million-dollar businesses, because after all, we are humans. You can't have 365 days of perfection of waking up at 5 a.m. doing XYZ. You need to understand your own priorities, iterate what works and what doesn't work for you. It won't be that you wake up one fine day and realize this is your perfect schedule or this is your perfect approach. You'll try different schedules, different approaches, different ways of being, different ways of doing things, and then reinvent yourself. And probably through your different phases of entrepreneurship, this is just the beginning. Probably when you mature, you will reinvent yourself again. So don't stress. Now this brings us to the myth, often called the 1000-day myth, which is give it time and it will work out. But trust me, that's not how it works. That's plain BS, because the definition of insanity, as Einstein said, doing the same thing over and over again in the same manner and expecting a different result. Well, that's downright insanity, isn't it? In fact, there's a certification in business to ensure that when you do the same thing over and over again in the same manner, you get the same outcome. It is called ISO 9001, where you have to document your procedures of doing things in your business to ensure that you get the same outcome when you repeat these things over and over again. So don't wait for those 1000 days. You need to establish quick feedback loops. This is the piece of wisdom here, because the quicker you arrest your mistakes, the better it is. There's a saying in Japanese, if you get onto the wrong train, get off as quickly as possible, because the more you go into the wrong direction, or let's say the further you go into the wrong direction, the higher is the cost of course correction. So you need to have quicker cycles of understanding whether your product or service is working, such as building a minimum viable product. For example, if you want to build an ATM machine today, it might as well be better if you just put up a box with a chimpanzee sitting inside and handing out cash. That's cheap, isn't it? But by doing so, you'll realize two people actually need a machine handing out cash at various locations. If that answer is yes, then probably it makes sense to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars to make robotic machines handing out cash, isn't it? So you need to build your MVP, and you need to make releases in incremental cycles, as they say in software development. You create a bunch of features, push it out into the market, and see how your users or audience is reacting, or as they do in marketing, what they call A/B testing. Create two sets of the website and see how potential customers are reacting to each of them. So you have these quick feedback loops to make sure that you're heading in the right direction. Don't get into that trap of perfection, that I'll release the product or the service when it's perfect, or the marketing pitch. Don't even wait for the marketing pitch to be perfect. Make 10 slides, pitch it to someone. If they like it, ask them what they liked about it, or if they don't buy it, ask them what is it that's not matching their expectations, or what is the shortcoming there. You have to do it in iterations. Now this brings us to the last point, which is learning to discard. Because when you build something, you invest your time, energy, and resources. So you develop some sort of attachment to that product, service, or even that PowerPoint presentation. But if it doesn't work for you, learn to discard. Don't get trapped into this sunk cost fallacy. So this was the last piece of advice here, and this brings us to the end of this video on what happens in the first phase of entrepreneurship. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, and if the content of this channel resonates with you, which is for entrepreneurs, founders, and even anyone who wants to excel in their career, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And thank you for hanging on till the end, and I hope to see you in the next video.